So, believe it or not, in between running, going skating, doing a day job, writing my manga, what else? Creating YouTube videos, playing video games, both new and old, I actually still find the time to do some pixel art, believe it or not. As a little aside, I mean, ever since I moved to Japan, my social media presence, shall we say, has certainly dipped, both of my own doing and also the time zone change. I've often toyed with the idea of maybe it's about time that I changed my channel's name away from Pixel Vixen to something else. So don't be surprised if I change the name of this channel at some point in the future. But anyway, I digress. Today's video is indeed all about pixel art, and the thing that some of you might be surprised about is that actually I have still been doing quite a lot. It's just like a lot of things these days as regards myself, I just don't really show a lot of it online, if I'm honest, and I sort of kind of referred to it in my previous statement that when I moved to Japan, the time zone shift meant that I just basically ended up not appearing on people's timelines, or just my visibility went down because basically I was active when basically most of my followers were asleep around the world. And so I've been spending time just going back to doing things myself and enjoying it on my own terms, because the fact that something maybe only gets 5 to 10 likes on whatever social media network you want to pull out the hat doesn't mean that it wasn't time well spent, because if I'm enjoying it on my own terms, that's all that matters. But I have still been working on pixel art. I just keep a lot of it to myself, if I'm honest, and maybe over the coming months I will show you a little bit more, because I do need to get back into the habit of actually producing some artwork related content, because I do acknowledge that sometimes when I'm filming myself using this little rig here, I sometimes feel like my enjoyment or my privacy of doing my artwork has been invaded a little bit by the camera's gaze, and I feel that I'm getting over that a little bit now. But hopefully this will mean going forwards there'll be a few more artwork videos coming from me. I can't promise there's going to be a lot of me on the camera, which may be a good thing, or indeed voiceover, because sometimes, quite frankly, I run out of things to say. Anyway, end of digression to today's topic. I've been thinking about this why question. Why's as regards to me in pixel art. So the first thing that I want to answer is, why do I still do pixel art, or why do I do pixel art full stop? Well, the simple answer is that it's just another form of expression for me. I mean, just the same as sometimes I choose to do colour pencil images over Copic marker images, it's just another means to express myself, basically. And, I've been thinking about the ways that I have been doing pixel art. Like I say, I have been doing it, you've just not been seeing it, quite frankly. And one of the things that I've been doing more and more over the last 3 or more years since I've been in Japan is actually taking sketches and ink drawings that I just do in my little sketchbooks and actually turning those into pieces of pixel art. And I somewhat started doing this when I put out a video probably about 3.5 years ago now, when I first moved to Japan, about how I speed up the pixel art process. And the way that I was starting to do it was to draw the image by hand, either by pencil or by ink, and then taking that into, in my case, my Mac, and basically using a scan taken on my phone, which is basically a photo that's adapted using a scannable app. I was then able to bring that into Amiga computer emulator and FSUAE into Deluxe Paint, and then work on the pixel art through there. But one of the things that I've been increasingly doing is preserving the way that those ink outlines look. So in my sketchbook I have plenty of pencil stuff, but I also pull out the ink pens. Like, for example, I just work on various poses of my OC, original character Saki Endo, and sometimes I come up with something that I really like. And this image here was one such image that I thought, do you know what, I think I'm going to do that as pixel art. So what I did was I used my iPhone, very old phone, to take a picture into the scannable app, which cleaned up the image straight away. And then what I was able to do with that picture was to airdrop it onto my Mac, use some, what do you call it? I forget what's the filter called again? It's not so much a filter, it's Threshold. I used some Threshold to basically make it a 1-bit image, black and white, and then I pulled that into Deluxe Paint. And one of the bonuses of using emulation for this is it means that I get true square pixels, because for those of you who perhaps don't realise, even if you're using a low resolution, whether it's PAL or NTSC or high-res interlace screen on your Amiga, a real Amiga this is, and say you're working on an actual CRT, on NTSC your pixels in low resolution mode, for example, are actually slightly taller than they are wide, and on a PAL low resolution screen they're actually slightly wider than they are tall, which means that if you were to then take that pixel art and bring it back into Photoshop, it's actually going to look either a little bit too tall or a little bit too wide, because basically Amiga pixels are not square. So by using emulation you can get true 1-to-1 pixel ratios, which means that I can then use these designs on all sorts of things, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's printing onto t-shirts or posters or anything else like that. So emulation in this case actually gives me a bit of a distinct advantage. But the reason for actually taking a piece of ink is that since I came to Japan, I've always loved hand-drawn stuff. But one thing that I've really noticed is that the Japanese generally really appreciate hand-drawn artwork. It's not to say that they don't like digital artwork, of course they do. But I really have noticed that they show a great deal more enthusiasm for hand-drawn, hand-created stuff than, say, on average from people from the UK. I think a lot of people from the UK would say like, oh, you're using colour pencil, that's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it? Whereas over here those questions don't seem to arise, or at least they haven't to me anyway. But the reason for doing it this way is that I can preserve those ink lines, you know, where there's different weights and expression used, you know, where suddenly it tapers off and so forth. And I really feel that you can see the hand of the artist when you look at hand-drawn artwork. And that's not to say it doesn't exist in digital, of course it does. But for me, I don't know, there's just something that I like about seeing hand-drawn artwork, and I wanted to preserve that more and more in the pixel artwork that I've been doing behind the scenes. And so by doing so, I was able to tidy up the outline of my character, preserving those different weights of lines and so forth, rather than it being a perfect 1-pixel outline which is anti-aliased and so forth. And I liked the effect that I got, because once it was all cleaned up, I could just use some very simple flood fills and so forth, almost creating like old school 8-bit graphics, a bit like you'd see on your Famicom or NES, that kind of style of stuff. And then from there I was able to introduce a few more colours into the palette to give it a bit more finesse with a bit of anti-aliasing. And the end result basically represents something that is much more akin to my style, where you've got these variable weights for the outline of the various parts of the character and so forth, in this case with the pixel art aesthetic. And I've actually been using this technique for other scenes, you know, full-blown scenes behind this character, for example, which I'm not going to show you in this video, where I take the pencil draft, for example, or sometimes the ink draft, and using this more or less the same method, I then tidy up the image as I go to create a pixel art background for these characters to sit on. Now I am actually working on something behind the scenes which I've been slightly hinting at on Patreon. I'm not really going to go into any more details, at least publicly on YouTube, and to be honest with you, on Patreon I've not really fully explained what I'm up to, because I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver than say I'm doing all of this and then it doesn't come to fruition, because all those things I started talking about at the start of the video, you know, my skating, my running, the fact that I do a job here, my sightseeing around Japan and playing games and all the other things that I do in life, you know, I have a busy life, you know, and I don't want to say, I'm doing this, and then it doesn't happen. People are like, well, why aren't you doing that thing that you talked about? But these graphics, I'm hoping, will start appearing, hopefully by the year's end, on another little project that I've been working on quietly. So, I'm sorry I don't really show a lot of my pixel art on this channel anymore. I just guess that things have moved on a little bit. Like I said in that channel update 3 years ago, I needed to focus on my manga illustration, of which I've been very busy on Patreon. I've been publishing pages of my manga, and despite the fact on pretty much the only social media network site that I use to any extent at all, Twitter, which is now called X, you know, like, even though I might post the result of hundreds of hours of work, which gets about 10 likes or something, on Patreon, my manga has been avidly followed by many of my followers on there. So I have been very busy on all the things that I said I was going to do, the manga and my studying of Japanese, because it's really important that I focus on those two things, amongst other things as well, because that's where I see my future, to be honest with you. I mean, who knows, maybe Pixel will figure into it somehow, but I do believe that I made the right decision 3 years ago to focus more on my Pixel and not my Pixel, on my manga and my Japanese study, because in return my focus on hand drawing is now feeding back into my Pixel, and who knows what these skills will provide to me in the future in my career and the way that I earn money. You know, I'm never going to go back to doing a singular job. I can see myself having fingers in many pies, probably doing a lot of freelancey kind of things, give me the flexibility that I need in my life. Anyway, before I gabble any more and distort the topic of this video, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Peace.